Welcome to Canadian Justice. I'm Christine Van Geyn, and today we're talking about the new frontiers of consumer data collection, your car. Many of the latest cars have advanced technology that allows them to know where you've been, where you're going, to access your contacts, call logs, and text messages. Some cars come equipped with cameras. How is that data used? What are the legal limits on its use by car companies, including limits on the sale of that data to third parties like insurance companies? What are the limits on turning that data over to the police? Here today to discuss this are two experts, Sairam Sanathkumar from Torys and Eloise Gratton from Osler. Thank you both so much for joining me today. Now, let's talk a little bit about the technology itself because I'm pretty unfamiliar with this stuff. My car is pretty old. It is not a hot new sexy car. It doesn't even sync to my phone. So I am a bit out of my depth in having experienced anything like the new technologies that's available. So, Sairam, maybe you could tell me a little bit at a very high level about what are some of the capabilities of these modern vehicles? What type of uh, data is it equipped to collect and how is it used?
Sure. So there are very many kinds of vehicles that collect data from passengers or drivers. So there are connected cars, which are equipped with internet connectivity, and these are often built through, they have built in SIM cards or Wi Fi. Then there are electric vehicles that we know are quite popular nowadays. There are autonomous vehicles and automated vehicles, and usually these are used interchangeably, although they are different. They mean different things in non-legal parlance. So autonomous is where it does everything by itself. Automated is where certain functions are automated, but you still need a driver to do other functions manually. And then you have vehicles with advanced driver assistance systems, ADAS. So there are a few kinds of vehicles that can collect data, but nowadays, any vehicle that you buy in the market, it will collect some kind of data from you. Either the vehicle will collect the data directly from you, or a third-party system that is built into the vehicle, like your infotainment system, for instance, will collect data. So, I mean, even trucks and other kinds of vehicles collect data about the kind of driving that the driver performs, the trip length and braking patterns, and many things to do with the diagnostics sometimes of the vehicle. So there are various kinds of vehicles that collect data, and they collect all kinds of data, right? There's telematics data like your location, GPS, speed, braking, driving patterns, and these are useful for a variety of functions, right? For instance, for navigation, for fleet management, for insurance purposes. I think you mentioned that in the beginning, and then safety system data. So you have a broad range of vehicles that collect a very wide variety of data. To answer your question, Christine.
Yeah, I actually was in Texas recently, and it was the first time I've ever seen a fully autonomous vehicle that drives sort of like an Uber. It's not an Uber, but it's a ride you can hail that complete has no driver in it, and you sit in the back seat, and it takes you where you want to go. That was really surprising to me. Siram, are there any other kind of surprising features of this technology that people should know about to sort of preface this whole conversation?
Yeah. So the thing with vehicles collecting data is that it is most often quite useful for both the auto manufacturer and for the user or the driver or the passenger, right? Because when the system collects data about, for instance, airbag deployment or your braking system performance or collision detection and lane departure warnings, these are meant to enhance your safety mechanisms in the car or the vehicle that you're driving. And these are useful for crash analysis, for sometimes regulatory reporting, improving safety features through analysis of this data. So and sometimes the data is not used for legal purposes, but most often it is, and most companies understand these obligations. So when a user goes to buy a car, he or she wants some of these features, and these are some of the deciding factors,
Mhm.
that might make the difference between buying a car and not buying a car. So I think most people understand that. But just like our mobile phones, for instance, I think people nowadays understand that cars collect data or vehicles collect data.
Mhm.
Um, I think in the last few years, many of them
Right.
have understood that mobiles collect data, but I think awareness is just coming in about cars and how they collect data. But I
Right.
think it's happening as we speak. Yeah.
I want to talk in the next segment about what some of those legal limits on the use of the data is. We will be right back. Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're talking about the sort of new frontier in data collection, consumer data collection, and that is vehicles. Now, we discussed in the last segment sort of these new technologies and new ways that vehicles are collecting data of drivers. Eloise, I'm really curious about what laws or regulations exist in Canada right now that sort of maybe limit how data can be collected, how it can be used by car companies, how, for example, how long it can be stored, if it can be sold. I'm really fascinated by this question.
Well, we can definitely think of privacy laws that would definitely potentially apply and regulate any type of collection of car information. So, or we have a federal privacy law in the country, PIPEDA, and we have certain provinces that have their own laws, Quebec, BC, and Alberta. So you have a few privacy laws that regulate how a business collect, use, and share personal information. So when we're talking about the type of information that are collected from cars, it may or may not qualify as personal information. Can it be tied back to an individual? So if we know who the car owner is, then clearly it becomes personal information and it's regulated by these laws. But perhaps some of this data is collected from numerous cars and aggregated just to get a sense of how these cars are driven and improve the products. So it depends which data we're talking about, but we can definitely assume that privacy laws would likely regulate some of this data for sure.
Sairam, anything you want to add there? In particular, I'm interested in the idea of the potential to have this data sold to a third party, like an insurance company. Presumably, in data about how you drive is very valuable to an insurance company in determining uh, what your insurance rate is going to be. So, what are the limits on selling that information?
Sure. So just to build on what Eloise was explaining, right? So we have the federal privacy law, PIPEDA, that's the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act, and we have provincial laws in Alberta, BC, and Quebec that are substantially similar to substantially similar to PIPEDA, that is. And then, unfortunately, Bill C-27, which had a privacy legislation that was supposed to replace PIPEDA, has now died on the order paper. So we have laws at the federal level, provincial level, and then we have some industry specific guidelines as well. Now, when it comes to the protections that users might have, these laws have the requirement of getting their consent, the user's consent. There are other kinds of protections like purpose limitation. You can collect information only for legitimate purposes. There's data minimization, that is where you collect information only necessary for the identified purposes. So you have a few protections in PIPEDA and the provincial laws. When it comes to sale of data to insurance companies, now that is when the auto manufacturers sell data to third parties, and that comes with some requirements as well. One, the fact that the customer or the user has to consent to it. They need to know what the third party is going to do with that data. Why is that being sold or shared with the third party? So you need to ensure that the customer is aware of what's happening with their data before you sell or transfer or share the data with insurance companies. And most often, this consent is given through consent forms, or you have privacy
Mhm.
policies, or you have end user agreements that they have to sign up to. So these are some of the ways in which you can get consent, but there are steps that the companies have to follow before they can
Now,
share that data. Yeah.
Eloise, I understand that there have been lawsuits about this exact issue in the United States about the sale of this data to insurance companies by auto manufacturers. Is this something like that possible in Canada, or do you think our privacy protections make it less likely that something like that would happen?
Our laws would come into play, and as Sarah mentioned, our laws are consent-based. So you need to be transparent to drivers, to car owners, and say, this is what we're collecting, this is who we're sharing your information with. Are you okay? Do you consent? And if the answer is no, then you can't share this data with insurance companies. So the like data broker business models are more tricky in Canada because of our laws that are consent based. Another protection that we have under the law is that we have a right to access information
Mm,
that an organization have about us.
right.
So let's say I'm trying to
W-
get
Let
some
let let's
insurance.
let let's
Yeah,
get into that in the next segment.
sure.
I want to explore
Okay.
it more fully. We'll be right back.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're talking about data collection by vehicles and how that data can be used. We were just talking about the potential for sale of that type of data to third parties, including insurance companies. I know there has been some litigation around that issue in the United States. Canada has a totally different privacy regime, though. So, Eloise, you were explaining our consent based model and how that type of business, these data brokers, is a lot trickier to run in Canada. I just wanted to give you a chance to finish what you were saying there.
No, that's exactly right. And we also have a right under our privacy laws to access personal information that an organization, a business have about us. So let's say I have an insurance company who received this data. I get a quote. I'm surprised. I would ask them, what are you basing your quote on? What information do you have about
Mm.
me, and how did you come up with this decision? And they will have the obligation to provide this information. So there's like a transparency around businesses exchanging information as well.
Now, one of the questions that's really interesting to me relates to limits that might exist on giving this type of data to police or to some type of government agency. Now, I imagine this would be incredibly useful data when it comes to crime, for example. But what needs to be done by government or by police if they want access to that type of, for example, vehicle location data or contacts in a phone that were logged through the vehicle. Eloise, what can you tell us about those types of restrictions?
Well, first we have to keep in mind that if the data exists, is discoverable, right? If there's an investigation, criminal investigation, there's a lawsuit, and this evidence is relevant, then upon request, this information could be made available. In the context of a criminal case, there's always like, does law enforcement have a reasonable grounds to access the information? And the other question is, do you have an expectation of privacy when you're driving in the street? And the answer is not black and white. Maybe you have an expectation of privacy in some of the information that could be collected by the car. um, but if there's an accident, people witness the accident, you're driving in a public street, maybe that expectation is much lower, and law enforcement could more easily have access to this kind of information.
Sairam, is there anything you want to add there about this
Yeah.
police accessing the data or government accessing, or maybe some cases where data has been used to help a criminal prosecution?
Yeah, I mean, there are exceptions under the federal law PIPEDA, right, where data can be shared without consent. For example, if the disclosure is required by law,
Like a
such as a
warrant?
court, yes, exactly, a court order or a warrant, or to comply with a subpoena or a statutory obligation, or if a disclosure is made in emergency situations to prevent harm or danger to a person, right? So, or even for investigations to enforce a particular law. So these are some exceptions to obtaining consent under the federal law. And yes, there have been cases, many of them have been reported in the media as well, I believe, where police have used vehicle tracking systems to track wrongdoers and criminals. So Uh, I mean, I think the Toronto Police Service and other enforcement agencies, law enforcement agencies, do use vehicle tracking technologies to help recover stolen vehicles and in tracking criminal activity. And with the scourge of stolen vehicles on the rise in the country, I think that's something that the police services do, as reported in the media. So yeah, those are some of the ways in which the system can be beneficial for law enforcement. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of the downsides of having an old car is I don't have that benefit. If my car were to be stolen, there wouldn't be a way of tracking it. But an upside is that because it's so old, no one is interested in stealing it. So, cost and benefit for everything.
Compromise.
Now,
Y-
Sairam,
y-
I just wanted to ask you about opt out. If you don't want the companies collecting this information, we've talked about how we have a consent based system. How easy is it to opt out of that data collection? We've only got about 30 seconds.
Yeah, you can opt out, uh, but not if you want the service to work, because sometimes for the service to work, you have to opt in, or for law enforcement purposes, like we discussed, you can opt out, and these can be done maybe through the digital interface that the car provides to you, or you can do that online, perhaps if they send you a link to
Mhm.
opt in or opt out. So those are some of the ways in which you can do this. Yeah.
We've got to go to commercial, but we'll be right back. Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're talking about new technology in our vehicles that allows them to collect data about us. This allows for all kinds of conveniences, but of course, it comes with a trade-off of this privacy concern around data collection. Eloise, do you think that that is a trade-off? Is that a false dichotomy? Is this actually something about creating a balance, or do you think that this is about balancing safety, convenience, innovation with these privacy concerns? What's your view on
It's
striking that balance?
I agree. It's all about striking the balance. And I think if consumers see the value, they'll be more open to having cars collecting more data. So I'm seeing recently software embedded in cars that can help train drivers, on how to drive. And in the context of AI, in self-driving vehicles, I think if we want to benefit from new technology, we're going to have to accept some type of trade-off on that front. Our privacy laws also have a principle. We call it the reasonableness test. So a practice is illegal even if you obtain consent, if it's not a reasonable practice. So there's some flexibility, but it ties into like a social norm, and it comes down to the average driver. Would they find this practice to be acceptable, reasonable, or not? But our attitude is obviously evolving as we see these benefits.
Sairam, I'm really interested in some of these emerging trends. We talked a little bit about them, like the use of AI, these self driving vehicles. Do you think that we're starting to really change the way we think about our vehicles and our relationship to them and our privacy when it comes to our vehicles? Is that completely different now?
Yes, I believe it is different. So I think we have now gotten around the fact that our mobile phones collect a lot of information about us, right? But mobile phones just don't collect. I mean, they are not the only things that collect information about us. There are apps in the mobile phones which are usually operated by third parties that collect information. So each time you download an app, you have to sign up to a privacy policy or some kind of an end user agreement, and that will tell you how they will use our information. Now, with cars, I think now we are seeing increasing awareness with users, drivers, passengers, that the cars will collect information, but mostly for purposes that are beneficial for you and for the auto manufacturer, right? So these trends, I believe, are here to stay, and we are going to see that with increased awareness, consumers will become comfortable with it because um, I, if I go to buy a car, I want that car to come with features that are personalized for me, that are customized for me. And I believe auto manufacturers are aware of this. They are cognizant of this. So they're offering these to the customers. So there's a lot that can be done with the benefits of AI and machine learning models, and they are being used by car manufacturers in partnership with third-party companies, whether it's your infotainment system or whether it's safety mechanisms, right? So I think these will improve the way we drive the cars, the way, and I think the public infrastructure will need to catch up with this at some point in the future. If there are completely autonomous vehicles out there in the roads, then we need the infrastructure for all of that in the years and decades to come. So I think these are some of the trends that we can definitely look forward to. Yeah.
Eloise, anything to say in the last 30 seconds about the trends we're going to see going forward?
No, I think our attitude and our expectation will evolve over the next few years as we see the benefits. That's my take on it.
Well, Sairam, Eloise, thank you both so much for coming on to share your expertise. This has been a really fascinating conversation for me, and I hope our viewers get a lot out of it. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you.
We've heard today about evolving technology in auto manufacturing, including how data collection in vehicles can help consumers, but also comes with risks. Do you know what your car is monitoring? Are you concerned about your privacy or happy about new added conveniences? What do you think of the state of our current laws to deal with these emerging technologies and get that balance right? You be the judge. Thanks for watching, and remember, a freer Canada starts with you.